Let's talk about some of the worst moments Steve Smith from American Dad has ever experienced. I'm talking about some of the times when he was brutally damaged physically, emotionally, mentally, and so much more, like in Season 3, Episode 12, The Widowmaker. While Stan was devising ways to get Francine to stop nagging, Steve was busy trying to raise bees for a science project that has long been over. He's like, bees are the best in the world. There's nothing better than bees. Klaus got exasperatingly sick of Steve and the bees, and while Steve was busy serenading the bees in a jar, the queen bee flew out of the jar and startled Haley, who started panicking. At that moment, Haley took the magazine she was holding and ended the life of the queen bee of Steve's hive.
What have you done?
Relax, you freak. It's just a bee.
Steve is so saddened that he holds a funeral for the queen in his pool and starts singing Boys to Men.
It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday.
You say what you want about the boy, but you cannot say the kid doesn't have a voice. Steve gets furious at Klaus and Haley about what they did to his bees, so he decides to become the new queen bee of his hive, bangs on their enclosure, and orders his bees to attack Haley and Klaus.
Your larvae will sing songs about what you do here today. And you who've mocked will now learn to respect the power of the bee.
Let's just say it doesn't go as he planned, because the moment the bees came out of the enclosure, they weren't straight for the one who was attacking their hive.
Armed with your toxin, attack! Oh, God, you kidding me? Oh, I loved you. Oh, where's... Oh, ah, oh, not me. Oh, ow! Oh, no, no! Ah, good. Ah!
Your brother's weird.
The boy got brutally ravaged by his bees, and it wouldn't be the first time that Steve gets attacked by animals, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet, so you never miss out when we put out a new video. Now, Steve gets in a lot of trouble and ends up in situations that are not his fault from time to time. Like the time that Steve got an intervention from his friends, which made me feel really sorry for him because he became an addict. It wasn't really his fault. You see, trouble started when Steve got a taste of Haley's drink Cougar Boost, which is an energy drink that Haley was using to study, and its contents are extremely effective, so the moment Steve had a taste of it, the boy went from 0 to 100 real quick.
Everybody dance now.
That was the beginning of Steve's troubles because soon the boy had a serious addiction to Cougar Boost, and he started doing some questionable things to get money to buy more energy drinks. First he destroyed his computer.
It's about precision. It's about precision. Things gotta be pushing other things. Swoosh, 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 swoosh.
Then he starts trying to get Haley to give him money and lying.
My daughter and I were touring the Capitol, and on the way home, our car ran out of gas. We need to get back to Concord for my mom's funeral.
And then he even sells fake Battlestar Galactica event tickets to his friends for $20 a pop.
That's it. Tickets are off the table. Hello, Bruce. Have Rumor and Tallulah meet me at Will Call.
Do something!
Okay, you want
And when they eventually found out, they held a very special intervention for Steve.
I sold you fake tickets, and still, all you want to do is help me.
Yeah, we're gonna help you. Help you pee blood!
Tochi even puts on a ninja mask and breaks out the nunchucks, so you know it's about to go down. The funny thing is we don't see what happened in the room. All we heard was Steve screaming and Barry saying they should add Steve's parents to the mix.
Let's kill his parents next! Let's kill them all!
This episode is really funny because while Steve was having problems, Stan had Francine get a divorce. After all, Stan had seen Francine's erotic garden, where she had a bush for every man she had ever slept with. And it turns out the garden is the biggest garden in North America. Stan remarries a woman and divorces her, and she ends up getting custody of Steve at the end of the episode. Now, this next moment is probably some of the most hilarious on American Dad, but you should be warned, there are some moments of animal cruelty, but it's kind of deserved. You see, young Steve had taken up cello lessons for a dance recital in order to impress the incredibly hot Lindsay Coolidge, and on his way to practice, Steve meets a stray cat. He tries to greet the cat, but the cat gets run over, so Steve runs to its side, and he's all apologetic, but he immediately gets a huge surprise.
I'm so sorry. I gotta get you to a vet. Ow! Why would you do that? I was trying to help you.
Steve abandons the cat and brings Snot, and Snot tells him that the cat was possibly just frightened, that's why he lashed out. Snot takes a box and crouches next to the cat.
Like that. Chicka, chicka, chicka. There you go, silly tummy. What were you so worked up about?
The cat is nice to Snot, and he even starts licking him. For a moment, it seems everything is going to be alright, so Snot gives the cat to Steve and leaves. Steve names the cat Simon, and he also tries to do the Chica Chica.
Chica, 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 Simon? Okay. I'm a friend. Yes? You know that now? Friend?
Chica, chica.
Steve gets angry and abandons the cat, but it doesn't stop there. Steve goes home and starts dreaming of him and Simon being best buds and having a lot of good times until Simon gets lost in the dream. By the time of the recital, Steve knocks it out of the park and his performance was incredible. Lindsay is impressed. It seems she's finally going to let him hit, but at the moment of his applause, a battered Simon crawls into his POV. Steve runs to his side and he's all, "You came to my recital," and he's all happy, but Simon passes out on the floor, so Steve picks him up.
So peaceful. Almost as if you were sleeping. Oh shit.
This is the moment when the animal cruelty begins. Steve throws Simon to the wall and smashes him with his cello. But even that was not enough to stop Simon because Simon goes for his back this time. And that's when Steve turns into a pro wrestler and just starts wailing on the cat for up to 5 times. And then he leaves the room and goes. Steve thinks it's over, but out of nowhere the cat comes out again when he tries to enter another room. What is the lesson indeed? Now, things are about to get as R-rated as we can get on American Dad. One of the funniest and worst behaviors I've ever seen Smith have is when he goes bananas, which was a plot piece in season 14, episode 3, Stan, Francine, Connie, and Ted. When Steve tells his mom and dad he wants to go spend some time with Barry and his family, they refuse because they suspect that Ted and Connie, Barry's parents, are possibly a little Coco.
This is nothing against Barry. We love Barry. Monstrously stupid sewer people.
Agreed. Answer is a hard no.
Another brilliant.
So Steve responds to their decision by throwing a tantrum, which apparently is known around the neighborhood as Steve going bananas, and it is a real sight to behold.
I feel it coming on!
Don't you do it, young man.
I think I'm gonna go bananas!
Do not go bananas.
It's gonna happen!
You
I'm
best
gonna
not
go
go bananas, boy.
Do it, Steve. Go bananas.
Is this what you want?
Crazy, right? The tantrum gets so bad that he rushes to his room and takes off his clothes, and at some point he falls out the window.
Me going bananas!
Sounds like Steve's going bananas again.
But that wasn't the last time that Steve went bananas because his parents reluctantly agreed that they meet up with Barry's parents. When they do, Steve finds out that Barry's parents are swingers, and Steve becomes afraid that his parents are going to sleep with Barry's parents. And here comes the R-rated part. Steve later discovers that his parents and Barry's parents are on a trip to a nudist resort, and he and Barry decide to crash into the resort, which means that a 14-year-old boy is going to see dozens of adults without clothes, and everyone in the series just acted like this was normal.
Smith, you two are coming home with me this instant!
You tracked us down all the way here?
What is your problem?
My problem is that you're too naive to see that they are...
Again, this entire conversation was being held in the nude, which is just layers of fun, but Steve found out that his parents were not interested in swinging and they were just hanging out with them for fun. When he goes to see Barry, we discover that Barry has turned into his evil genius state, which is something that happens when Barry doesn't take his antipsychotic medication. Barry tells him that he's arranged for both their parents to meet at the sauna, and he laced the room with a powerful aphrodisiac steam, which will force them to sleep with each other as punishment for not letting them hang out in the first place.
Now, your worst fear will come true!
This is the same guy that bit my finger.
This aggravates Steve, so he finally starts going bananas.
Stop it!
You best not go bananas!
Here I go!
Again, it's important to note that this entire altercation happened when they were both naked, and it really is an unflattering look for Steve, waving his hand like a maniac when you're completely nude. What a dork. Turns out he did all that for nothing, by the way. The parents just ended up sleeping with their respective partners, so he and Barry wasted their time. Not a great look, Steve. Not a great look. And this happens to be a recurring theme on American Dad, but you'll find out eventually. This is probably my favorite American Dad premiere, and it's one of those moments where we see Steve turn into a beast, but it's also one of those moments that makes you go, I can't believe this is happening. So Steve gets chosen to sing the national anthem for the Langley Falls Veterans Day celebration, and Stan seems to be a bit unimpressed by his singing.
Oh, say, can you see?
Steven!
Don't know how anyone can have problems with that, but Stan does. He thinks Steve needs to experience war so he can truly sing for veterans. That's why he takes him to the Langley Falls Veterans Country Club, where they host a Vietnam War reenactment, where instead of using real firearms, they use paint guns and red markers as knives, and it's hilariously ridiculous. There, Stan makes Steve stand guard all night even though he's kept him awake for 2 nights. So the base gets overrun, Stan gets captured, and there are only 4 survivors left.
Steve, what happened? Man, what a letdown!
Okay, now make that 3 survivors. So Steve Buckle and Dick, who consumed a crazy amount of acid, decided to go rescue Stan. The problem is that Buckle then loses his legs, at least by reenactment standards, and Dick is completely spaced out to know what's going on. Therefore, Steve has to go in alone with some really cool voiceover.
What were we doing here? Was it worth it? Just to become better singers? The only thing that made sense anymore was my mission. Save Dad.
Meanwhile, Stan is being tortured by Roger for the password to the family's pay-per-view system, and Roger is employing some really nasty methods by reading the entire first draft of Sex and the City. Finally, Steve rescues Stan, and Stan is proud of him, but then Steve starts getting visions of what happened during the reenactment, like he was undergoing PTSD. Forcing him to retreat to the shed where he rescued Stan, Stan proceeds to give him what I believe was the best speech on American Dad at the time.
I pushed you too hard, put too much pressure on you. But I only did it because I love you and want you to succeed. But you don't need to be pushed, because you're doing great on your own.
And then Stan tells Steve that he's all right and he doesn't have to sing the national anthem his way anymore, and he can do it in whatever way he pleases. So father and son leave the place with everyone thinking this man has been sodomizing this young boy. But hey, it still was a very great father and son moment. As for the national anthem, well, it went like this.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? Girl, I'm gonna rock you in Freedom Town tonight.
That's my neighbor.
This wouldn't be the last time that Stan traumatizes Steve, but now let's talk about the time when Roger traumatizes Steve. You see, Roger and Steve have a very special relationship, and as you will find out, Roger doesn't like it when anyone is sharing the spotlight or feeling special. That is why in Seasons 3, Episode 3, Dope and Faith, where Steve starts getting all high and mighty bragging to Roger about how special he was, Roger hated it so much that he concocted the most diabolical plan to trick Steve. First, he threw a brick through Steve's window.
Oh, for God's sake.
Now Steve checks the dummy owl and sees that there's a letter attached to it. The letter says that he's been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and says,
It says I've been admitted to Hogwarts School of Wizardry. The gypsy was right. I am special.
And here I was, thinking you were just a gullible idiot. When do you start?
The look on this alien's face as he deceives his little boy is priceless. Now Steve starts running to pack his things because the letter says that he is resuming the next Saturday, and Roger pats himself on the back if only he knew what was coming his way. After that, Roger leads him to the address on the letter, which is a rundown shack that Roger thinks is a building owned by a bunch of crack addicts.
Okay, Steve, how special are you gonna feel when some crack whore throws you off her porch?
And that's when things start to get interesting, because the house isn't run by crack addicts, but by crack manufacturers. There's a full-on factory going on behind those doors, and Steve thinks it's actually Hogwarts, and the criminals think that Steve is one of their new recruits who's going to be responsible for making more dope.
Is he fighting invisible Dementors?
Shut up.
Potions class.
Then he gets taken to the back room where dope is being made, but Steve of course thinks that it's his potions class, and the guy mixing the chemicals is his potions master.
This is Hoppy. He knows what to do.
My potions partner. You're my Ron Weasley.
And then the dude mixing the potions starts yelling, Lávate las manos, which is Spanish for wash your hands, but dumbass Steve thinks it's a spell like Wingardium Leviosa, so he keeps repeating it.
Lávate las manos.
Is that a spell?
Lávate las manos.
Lavate las manos.
Lávate las manos.
Lavate las manos.
Lávate las manos.
Lavate las manos.
The even crazier thing is that Steve was actually good at making dope. So yeah, it's a Breaking Bad situation going on now. The criminals give him a bunch of money for his good work, and Roger, who probably should have pulled the plug by now, since his elaborate plan had gone too far, starts to live a lavish lifestyle off from Steve's earnings. But one day, Steve brings a bag of dope back home because he wanted to put in extra hours to impress his professors. So now, things started to get wicked.
Oh, I wanted to practice potions at home, so I borrowed some supplies.
Oh my God, what did you do?
Professor Icepick won't mind. It's like I'm doing extra credit.
Do they know where you live? Do they know where you live?
The criminals pull up at their home with a bunch of firearms, so Roger pulls Steve to him and they duck underneath the window. By this time, you might think that Roger will give up the charade, but instead he says,
Because they're Death Eaters.
Oh, disguised as teachers from the school.
For someone who claims to be really smart and special, Steve surely is amazingly dense. He falls and breaks his glasses while the thugs start beating Roger, so Steve starts casting the only spell he learned, which is Lavate las manos, whereas something magical happens to Roger.
Lávate las manos.
Huh?
Thanks to the influence of the magic powder, Roger started going John Wick and nearly kills everyone.
Las manos.
Roger then proceeds to teach Steve a new potion consisting of a hacksaw and sulfuric acid. The fact that Steve thought he was Wizard the entire time just proves again that he is just a complete dumbass. When Stan and Francine get into an argument about each other's parenting methods, they both conduct a race where the winner gets to have the final say on how Steve is raised. Francine manages to win the race due to Stan's shitty racing skills, but instead of him taking the loss gracefully, he does something even more crazy.
This is a clone I had made at the CIA for me to raise how I like. I'm calling him Steve-arino.
Hi, Mom.
Pretty great, huh? I also cloned world-famous comedian John Leguizamo. Zamo, do an impression.
Okay,
Stan clones Steve and calls Steve's clone Steverino. They come up with a system where Francine raises Steve how she wants and Stan raises Steverino how he wants. Now Stan wants his son being all tough, so he sends Steverino to military school to make him athletic, while Francine hops for raising Steve passively and giving him whatever he wants. But this isn't about Steverino, honestly. This is about Steve. This dude honestly becomes a nuisance in this episode as Francine gives him everything he asks for, including alcohol.
I think I'll take up swearing.
Stan slowly turns Steverino into an exceptional young man, and Francine's methods turn Steve into a degenerate couch hugger. Anyway, Steve starts going on adult sites. He initially heats a watermelon and creates a hole in it so he can fuck it. This kind of reminds me of Tech Knight from The Boys, who also wants to fuck every single hole he encounters. Nevertheless, Steven even farts and fans the odor for Francine to smell. That is just crazy. 3 months later, Steverino is extremely successful and is winning awards, while Steve is out of shape and masturbates like 13 times a day. Andrew Tate definitely would be proud of him. Eventually, Stan starts to gloat about Francine being a bad parent, but soon, Steverino runs away because he can no longer stand his father's tyranny. This makes Stan sad, whereas Steve starts giving him orders too.
And don't skimp on the chili peppers. I want my farts to hurt.
Steverino eventually comes back, chases the real Steve, and kidnaps him and a bunch of cats for some reason, while Stan and Francine have to go save him. He and Stan get into a fight, and Francine ends up releasing the cats who start attacking Steverino, who eventually falls off a tall building. The real Steve gets freed, and Francine finally knocks some sense into him while Steverino tries to attack Steve again, but this time, Stan hits a fuel tank and blows him up. Finally, the family goes home, but Steverino is left facing Simon the cat. You guessed it right, the same cat from previous seasons. Then this happens.
I'll see you in hell.
This lazy version of Steve is probably the worst version, and most annoying one. There's also the best version of Steve in the show, you know, apart from the times when he doesn't sing, which is when Steve became the Greater Chimdale County Man. You see, Stan got into a fight in the cinema and was hoping Steve would come to help him, but Steve ran off to get help instead, and Stan was very disappointed because he thought his son wasn't brave. Meanwhile, Francine finds out that she might be pregnant, and Stan is convinced that this is a chance for him to finally have the brave son he's been looking for, a new Steve. This is no joke. He plans to change the original Steve's name so that he can call his new son Steve. Eventually, Steve is distraught and goes to see Roger, who comes up with a plan to turn him into a superhero. He'll get him to do heroic deeds on tape, whereas Steve will pretend to accidentally reveal his identity to Stan to gain his respect again, and with that, Greater Chimdale County Man was born.
The night belongs to me, for I am Greater Chimdale County Man!
No! That name's terrible!
After that, they go to a sketchy neighborhood just to find someone being in trouble. However, they don't find anyone except for a guy in an alley standing next to a big dumpster getting head. Eventually, they find a bunch of kids defacing a monument while Steve goes to stop them while Roger films. Unfortunately, things don't go as planned.
I demand you cease your criminal mischief.
Look how round this kid's head is. Its geometrical perfection is unnerving. Let's beat him up.
Roger, the plan's not working.
Roger tells Steve that he'll edit the video to make Steve look good, so he shouldn't worry about it. Then they turn the tapes over to Greg and Terry, whereas Stan sees the clip, so Roger bids Steve farewell as he goes to accidentally reveal his identity.
This is your moment.
Thanks, Roger.
You're welcome, champ. I do it because I care.
When Steve goes to reveal his identity, he is unsuccessful because he can't find his costume, and that's when Roger appeared.
Here.
Hold on there, stranger in my living room. Roger? You? You're Langley Foe?
Roger ends up being the one getting the credits for the whole act. Steve is evidently distraught by everything, and then we find out that Roger did this just so he can attend the heroes dinner that Stan is hosting. What a great guy. Later on, Steve goes on a walk in the city, and he sees an unattended baby trapped in a moving vehicle going toward heavy traffic, so he does the next best thing. Steve manages to save the baby and the cute animals inside the car before the car smashes into a gas tank. He is then lauded by the child's mother and a police officer, and he pats himself on the back because he realizes that he doesn't need Stan's approval anymore to consider himself a brave boy.
Would think I'm brave, but now I know I'm brave, and that's all that counts.
What the hell was he talking about?
Kid's probably on drugs. I know I am.
Yeah, even after all his bravery, everyone he saved ended up losing their lives and he didn't even notice. Steve still thought that he is him. Eventually, Stan finds out that Steve was the real hero, and they end up bonding. Finally, Stan also admits Steve is brave, so that's a bit of a happy ending. These were some of Steve Smith's worst but also interesting moments in American Dad. Let us know in the comments what you think about them.